for the work that we've done and for the work that I've been doing for my whole career, you have to be an optimist in order to work on in the area of democracy and elections and good governance, whether it's in Congo, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's in Zimbabwe, Latin America, wherever. But I feel like Congo's in a watershed moment right now. They did hold successful and, by all accounts, pretty good elections in 2006, national elections. They're the first democratic elections that the country had basically ever held since 1960, at the time of independence. So it's possible. It's not, and they can do it. They have enormous problems in the Congo facing them, and it's the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa. It's the second, I think it's the second largest French-speaking country in the world. But it's home to the second largest rainforest in the world after the Amazon. I mean, there are true. You talk about the negatives of Congo, but you talk about all the potential of Congo, and it's just amazing. And especially with President Obama's trip to Africa, there's a lot of talk about Africa rising. And I'm a firm believer in Africa rising, but also a realist. Yes, probably 8 of the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa, and Congo being one of them with almost double-digit economic growth. But all of that growth has not impacted the man on the ground. But elections are important to Congolese. As recent as January, Congolese people spoke up by taking to the streets. Parliament, the National Assembly, and the Senate tried to pass a very controversial elections bill linking essentially a census to the national elections, and people took to the streets. 40 people were officially killed, probably many more died fighting for democracy. So it's very important, and I think we're doing something, but we're supporting the efforts of the Congolese who are desperate to make that next move to a more stable democratic place.
Very good. So that's making the case, okay, you're 1960, at 46 years before your second election. Now we're in 2015, going into 2016, we have 9-10 years before maybe the next successful election. And yet the McCain Institute is focusing on provincial and local elections in North Kivu rather than the country as a whole. Why is that?
Well, it goes back to Mrs. McCain, quite honestly, and we also receive funding from the Howard Buffett Foundation and Howard Buffett. Mrs. McCain, as many of you know, is a humanitarian in her own right. She's been doing this almost as her career for the past 20, 30 years, and I don't think many people know the extent that she's worked in this field. And she first got involved in Congo in 1994 as a result, essentially, of the Rwandan genocide, when she was in charge of a medical evacuation or emergency medical organization, found herself in Rwanda and entered Congo, fleeing Rwanda and the genocide, and set up shop there. So this has been it's been her heart for so long, and her first place of landing essentially was in North Kivu, and her emphasis in Congo has been that area as well, with her work with the Eastern Congo Initiative and other organizations. But also for Howard Buffett, this is probably the most conflict-ridden part of Congo, along with South Kivu. It's the epicenter of the ongoing conflicts, and so it's if we can get it right in a place like North Kivu, if we can help the Electoral Commission, we can help political parties, civil society come together and do a better job in running the elections, but also preparing people in North Kivu for these elections. We feel like we can make a difference, and if we can make a difference in North Kivu, then it can have sort of a waterfall effect in other parts of the country.
Although I'm not going to draw you out on this, but making that argument, yes, you take the hardest place, and if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. The opposite would be take a reasonably accessible place and then be successful there, and then build and build. But There's, I think, something admirable in tackling the hardest place, and that is where a lot of the violence has been, as you said. But then that begs the question, all right, so you're going to have elections at provincial and local levels sometime, maybe not exactly on the schedule that was planned, but sometime. What needs to happen for those to happen successfully, and how does an outfit of a handful of people in Washington, D.C. make a difference in what happens on the ground there?
Well, I think we've been very surprised with the level of acceptance and partnership on the ground. I think there was a lot of skepticism when I arrived and the McCain Institute arrived in a place like North Kivu, and they're like, who are you? Why do you want to do this? They didn't know who we were, didn't know who McCain was. Some people knew, Senator McCain ran for president. But when you start establishing relationships and you start proving yourself, proving to people that you want to help, you want to assist, then the relationships are reciprocated. So we feel very like we have real partnerships with the Senate, which is a very controversial organization. It's the Electoral Commission, but it's the local entity. I'm a firm believer that Congo and many African countries and other countries are labeled corrupt, and local officials are corrupt. But I think a lot of local officials don't know their roles and responsibilities, and people don't invest in them. And we feel like we're investing time, we're investing efforts, we're doing something that folks in Kinshasa aren't helping them with. We're helping them organize forums, we're helping them organize and build relationships and confidence with the political parties, with civil society that otherwise wouldn't have been done. So with our small and meager team, we've started to make inroads with our partners, and oftentimes it is about building trust at that level. And while this is a conflict-ridden place, it's also a relatively small place. It's not that big, so it's relatively accessible geographically. It's hard terrain. There are militias. There are problems, but we're able to travel. And we're able to work with local entities, MONUSCO, the UN, and others to help us maneuver the tough areas. So it hasn't been as tough as we thought.
So the sorts of things that one does then. So you've done public opinion research.
Yeah.
You've done candidate training.
Correct.
You've done public awareness building.
Yes.
You've done stakeholder convening at a local level, at a national level. You've had the local and the national levels encouraged to talk to each other. You've convened international stakeholders. What else?
Yeah. You've named them. So we're continuing to do all of that. But what's important is educating people on what we're doing. So as you alluded to, we've done a public opinion survey, 1,300 people last year. We also just finished a 3,300 person survey, so we can get deeper into what people are actually thinking in North Kivu. And often, when we feel like the answers to those questions will not only be regional, but will have a national impact. A lot of people are interested in what people are thinking in North Kivu and the Kivus in the east, because it's such a hotbed of politics, and a lot of the politicians and come from this region, or major politicians. Others, obviously, it's a country of 70 million people, so there's leadership throughout the country, but probably people in Kinshasa and Ecuador and Bandundu and all these other places are tired of hearing of the Kivus. But no matter how tired you are of hearing of the Kivus, there's still it's a extremely important place. But we've done the polls, we've done candidate training, but we focus quite a bit on women. That's an important element of this project. Obviously, to Mrs. McCain, we brought 5 women here through our Next Generation's Professionals program. So candidates vying for provincial and local elections and possibly national elections. So there's an overemphasis on training the next generation of not only leaders, but the next generation women leaders of Congo, but especially in North Kivu. We want more women involved, not just as candidates, but as, as the electorate, as, civil society. They are an extremely important element of the electoral process, and as we've seen in the past in Congo, women have been, not necessarily barred from the process, but underrepresented. In most cases, women's representation goes up after different sets of elections, but from 2006 to 2011, actual representation of women at the national level went down, and that's not a success. That's a failure. So we want to try to improve that.
All right, I'd like people in the audience to be thinking about some questions, and I'll ask one more while you gather your thoughts. And please ask a question and keep it brief so that we keep the overall time down rather than comments from the audience, but questions. My question is, what was the most surprising thing that's happened so far? I mean, everyone starts off with a plan, and then you try to execute the plan, and as the military says, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So what was the most surprising thing you've come across so far?
I think our level of acceptance in Congo. I don't know why. I mean, maybe it is that we are actually doing something, and people are actually seeing us do something on the ground. We're not just another organization that comes and goes, as so many people do. But I think my impression is that we've been welcomed with open arms by, whether it's the opposition political parties, the governing party, whether it's the CENI, whether it's MONUSCO, it's everyone. Everyone is welcoming us, and I feel like, and also just the actual terrain of working there. It's a difficult place to work just because of the politics, and it's a region that actually has militias and different armies and conflict, but getting around is not as difficult as anticipated. Yes, you have those stories of trudging through the jungle and trying to get to different places, but it's actually been a lot easier to work than I think anticipated.
Okay, if there are members of the audience here, I'd like to turn to you. Yes, ma'am, with the
Hi. So my question is,
please introduce yourself.
I'm Sartaj. I'm an intern at the Malala Fund. My question is, how participative are the youth in this electoral process? As you mentioned, the last free elections took place 9 years ago, and so there must be a whole new generation that you've had to deal with.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that?
Yeah. That's a great question, a very relevant question right now in Congo. It's very controversial right now. If we're dealing with the local and provincial elections, which are scheduled to happen in October, the Election Commission has no plans on registering new voters. So the voters roll that will be used is from 2011. So you're talking anywhere between 2 to 5 million people will be left out of the electoral process. Now, the people that I spoke about and that were killed and injured in January, they're all youth. They come from the University of Kinshasa, but also in Goma there were riots, and also in March. The youth have been very active in Congo. There was an event held in March. It was helped sponsored by the U.S. Embassy that brought activists from Senegal, from Burkina Faso, places where there had been successful youth campaigns to obviously there was a coup in Burkina Faso, but the youth played an important role in trying to bar Blaise Compaoré from seeking a third term, and same with what happened in Senegal with President Wade and helping defeat him from basically seeking an unconstitutional third term there. They were brought to Congo to talk about what they did as far as civil society, not to overthrow a president or to present roadblocks to a president from seeking a third term, but to talk about the importance of civil society and what youth play. And so that was led by youth, and it was a handful of people. I think there was less than 100 people. It was broken up by the police. These people were detained. The Senegalese, the Burkinabe were detained. The Congolese that were, I think they're still detained. I think there are 2 that are still left over. Maybe they were recently released. But this shows just how sort of scared the Congolese government is of youth participation in this election. But how important it is that youth do participate and are included, because we're not going to be able to tell who they're going to vote for one way or another. But at the end of the day, they're playing an important role. And I think one group in particular that a lot of people have talked about, and they're based in Goma, it's called La Lucha, if you speak French, which I don't, kind of oddly. I think it means life or the fight, the struggle. It's a group of young people, young professionals. They have jobs, and we've met with them. They're not looking for handouts. They're not looking, every now and then they want training, but they're just, and when they take to the streets, they just kind of come out and they talk about, well, we need clean water. Well, what's so controversial about clean water? We want something to do with better governance. They're not talking about just democracy, they're just talking about good governance. So the youth are really playing a more active and elevated role in this electoral process, but if the government and the Electoral Commission doesn't allow them to vote in this election, especially the provincial or the local elections, it could cause, some grave security threats.
And yes, gentleman here. Do we have a mic runner?
Hi, yeah, my name is Vincent, and I just had a question about the coltan industry, actually. I want to know how big of a role, because obviously it's a really big economic thing in North Kivu and the Kivu province. How big of a role does that play in the elections, and did you guys do anything to address it, I suppose?
If you talk to the Enough Project, they could give you a much better answer on that. We don't really get involved in the questions of the illicit mining trade. Obviously, it plays a role in what goes on in Eastern Congo, but to tell you the truth, it may impact as far as politicians and money exchanged in favors and whatnot, and supporting different candidates here and there, but it really hasn't necessarily impacted what we do on a daily basis, and it really hasn't really come up when in our polling. The mining issue, the trade in illicit or conflict minerals really doesn't come up as an issue. Economics comes up as an issue, security comes up as an issue, and all of those kind of play probably in the mining issues. But as a singular issue, it doesn't really rise to the level of great interest. I don't say great interest, but not at the top 3.
Interesting. Yes, here in the middle.
Brian Marshall, I'm semi-retired but still doing periodic short-term assignments with international agencies. And you mentioned that the country's economy has been doing very well, among the fastest growing in Africa. And are the results of that being seen with the general population and also the infrastructure?
Trickle down. Is there trickle down?
I would say, and I think most people would agree, there hasn't been much trickle down. When you go to a place like Kinshasa, Kinshasa's not a bad city. It's big, it's congested, and whatnot, and what's good about when you go to Kinshasa, you see the construction, you see sort of this construction boom, you see better roads and whatnot, you see businesses and whatnot. But when you go further out, outside of Kinshasa, you're not seeing sort of that trickle down effect. Maybe I haven't traveled. You have to remember, Congo's the same size as Western Europe for the most part, or to put it in American terms, the size of the United States east of the Mississippi. So I haven't been everywhere, but you can imagine if you don't go to places like Kinshasa or Lubumbashi in Katanga, there probably isn't that much development. I think I was recently told the amount of roads in Congo, paved roads, is the same as Delaware. It's tremendously low. Although
Delaware's made some improvements.
improvements have been made. I mean, you know, if you talk to the government, they'll insist that more roads have been built under President Kabila than under Mobutu. So there has been tremendous, you know, you see the economic impact, but in the hands of the people, not so much. It's poor. It still remains extremely poor. I mean, you see the infrastructure, but it's not so great.
Can we pass across the table?
Hi, Joe Gini, former correspondent at the United Nations. I was there when the 2006 and 2011 elections happened, and I was curious. In 2006, it was regarded that the Seni's predecessor was fairly independent and well regarded, and the Seni itself was, as you said, kind of not as well regarded. And I was wondering, I mean, one of the accusations against the Seni was that it was effectively being stacked at the top with people that were loyal to the president. And I was wondering how, if you're dealing with them, is it effective to help work with and teach the responsibilities to people at the lower level when the top may be politicized?
Spell out Seni.
What's that?
Spell out Seni. It's the National Election.
So, yeah, so SETI is the Independent National Election Commission. SETI is the French acronym. So the same head as, so we have President Father Malo Malo, who's the president of the Election Commission. He's the current president, but he was also the same president of the Election Commission in 2006. But in 2006 was very different. The UN basically ran those elections, and the Seni at that point was basically a figurehead organization. They didn't, you know, they were there, but the UN was completely in charge of all the logistics and I think the ballot printing and all of that. So you had the UN backing the whole system. So that's why to an extent, the elections went off, I don't say without a hitch, but went off very well. And there was such a huge international investment in those elections. And yeah, Father Malo Malo at that point had been probably more, I would say maybe a little bit more independent, maybe not seen so much in the hands of the president and his party. Now it's probably changed. He was reappointed after the election head in 2011 was very controversial, seen much closer to President Kabila and the government there. He started out back so when Father Malo Malo came back, he was seen as sort of this, okay, he brought us good elections in 2006, he can do it again in 2016 for the presidential election, but these other elections that are supposed to be held. But he's been very controversial, and he's been seen very much in the pocket of the president and the ruling party. But things evolve, and I think Father Malo Malo is evolving, maybe slowly, but also seeing, I think, the writing on the wall, but that he can't run an election the way he necessarily wants to. It's going to be highly controversial. If these young people don't get registered to vote, you're going to have serious problems on your hand, and I don't think he wants that as part of his legacy. He's built a legacy around peace. He's been a peace, he was appointed by the president to be one of the chief peace negotiators, in 2008, 2009 with the militias in North Kivu. So he's kind of built this person, persona around being a peace builder. So the fact that I think he's going to be evolving over this electoral period, and I think we're going to see some changes probably in the very near future.
Okay, last question, and it's from me.
Okay.
You just mentioned a whole bunch of things. Voter registration, postponements, head of the National Election Commission being a crony of the president. 1 year from now, sitting in this chair over our conversation and cocktails next year, what is the situation going to be in terms of the elections, both national and the local ones that we're working on? What do you expect to happen? And what do you expect it to look like at that point going forward?
Yeah. Well, Congo's a hard place to predict, and I hate to be on record of predicting what happens in a place like Congo. I think at this point, August of next year, elections, we'll be preparing for national elections. We'll be preparing for presidential, National Assembly elections, which are scheduled for November of 2016. Local elections will have not happened. Provincial elections will likely be coupled with the national elections, and we will be going through a national registration process, registering the, basically the new million, 3 to 5 million people who have turned 18, but also cleaning up the registrar's roll. I think that's where we'll be, and basically we'll have, what I hope doesn't happen is that we have a Burundi situation, because August basically marks the beginning of the campaign season, the official campaign season, or September, so we'll essentially know whether President Kabila has decided to try to extend power, run for another term, which he can't. He's barred, constitutionally barred from changing the Constitution to run for a third term. But I doubt we'll see any sort of referendum. So I think we're just going to be preparing. I feel very, I won't say confidently, but pretty confidently President Kabila will not be running for president, and we will have a slew of new candidates running for president.
Great, let's hope so. But, as Yogi Berra said, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. So give me a round of applause here for Paul. Thank you all for coming. This is going to be the last of our Conversation and Cocktail series for the summer, but I hope that you remain engaged with the McCain Institute. I hope you follow us on social media. I hope you look at our website. I hope you come to our future events. We're going to have a graduation ceremony for our Next Generation Leaders program in this building on September 3rd. And the first debate that we are going to be holding this fall season, should the United States be the world's policeman? We'll be doing that at the Navy Memorial Theater on September 10th in the evening, so we hope you can make it there. Please, again, remain friends of the McCain Institute. Go out and be our ambassadors in the town and around the world. And thank you again for coming, and please enjoy.